Namaskar. Today's episode is about Kundalini and what Kundalini is about and the changes it can make within us. Maybe you have already been to a Kundalini class, you were curious about it, you did one here, you maybe didn't like it, all those hand movements, you might found it a bit difficult, maybe even a little bit weird and out there. Maybe you've had a longer practice, or maybe you've never experienced it all. And today I'm inviting Satya, who is a Kundalini teacher and master in Kundalini, to explain some of the benefits and also the true Kundalini compared to what we often see. And I don't say this in a judgmental way, but in the West, sometimes variations of Kundalini do get changed a lot. And it can do two things. It can be harmful if you don't have a proper teacher and you don't know what you're doing. Or it can just have no effect at all and mean nothing and just be a whole lot of physical exercises and hand movements. There is a specific guided way to do a Kundalini. A couple of years ago, a couple moved into our neighborhood. And by chance, we met one day, a beautiful couple from Chile with their 2 children. And I discovered that they were Kundalini teachers. And this really intrigued me. I was very drawn to their energy. They just felt like there was this glow around them. You felt peaceful, you felt well-being, you felt safe in their presence. And so we got to know each other a bit more. I went to several of their classes, and they also came and experienced our yoga with horses, and we started to deepen our relationship. And I really love how these 2 people portray Kundalini and really show the essence of Kundalini. Going to their classes, I really love their energy, both Satya and his wife Navkiran's energy. And I also immediately felt the effects. Maybe I am more in tune because I meditate a lot and I do a lot of healing practices. So I'm very sensitive to energy. But it was very, very powerful, I have to say. And I was very intrigued by this. And I continued to do some classes with them, and they came, and I also shared yoga with horses with them, which they really enjoyed and were astounded by the benefits of horses and that energy. And so we came up with this idea that we wanted to create something together in the sacred space of kindred spirits, to do a Kundalini immersion. And what does this mean? It means whether you've never been to a Kundalini class or you are a practitioner in Kundalini class, it is really benefit for all. So Satya and Navkiran and we talked, and we really decided that we would love to do a special Kundalini immersion here at Kindred Spirits. And that is what Satya is here to talk to you. He's here to tell you what is Kundalini, what are their benefits. And he has this really very easy way to bring words together so that you can understand. Often we'll explain things, especially in Kundalini, and it passes right over our head. I found in his explanations to the students when I went to the classes so clear. It really made sense. And I just loved how he worked with this energy as well. So we've created this 10-day Kundalini immersion, and it's really for people that are experienced in Kundalini or have never practiced Kundalini before. And I'm going to let Satya talk to you about all the different aspects of Kundalini. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the retreat itself and who is it for and how you can attend that as well. So let's begin.
Namaskar, kindred spirits. So happy to have you here today and to talk about Kundalini Yoga and what it means to us and what it could mean to you. And maybe many of you have been to a Kundalini class or have tried one or have heard about it, or maybe you practice Kundalini regularly. Either way, many questions may arise, and we hope to answer some of these today with our special guest, Satya, teacher and master of Kundalini Yoga. So Satnam, Satya, welcome to our podcast today. So glad to have you here.
Satnam, Terry, thank you for the beautiful introduction. I have to say that I'm drawn to your energy as well. You have a beautiful energy, and all the experience with your horses and everything that you do is so beautiful. I recall this memory of a few months ago when you invited us to your place there and have this wonderful time with the horses. It was something very unique for me. And I know Navkira, my wife, also experienced it because there's this kind of resonance that start vibrating between the horses and you as a human. where you have to choose. You have to take a decision of being totally present with the energy of the horse or be against it. So
Mhm.
it's a really intricate thing that happens in the mind and in the energy that give you that chance of being very present. So if anyone have the chance to experience meditation or being near horses like the ones that Terry has, I think it's a gift. It's something where you can learn a lot. For
Thank
sure,
you.
the horses have a very beautiful, wisdom, energy, spirit. It's something very unique, and I could understand it better that time when you shared that space with us. Thank you for that.
No, it was really with pleasure. I love to share. Our horses love to share too. They like that vibration. So often humans are just doing things with their horses, competition and riding. And while all that can be, if it's properly done and humanely done with compassion and love, can be beautiful, it's also just being in the presence of horses, and that can be enough for the healing process to happen. So, Satya, I would love you if you could tell us a little bit about your journey and Navkiran's journey through what brought you to Kundalini, your experience of it, anything you'd like to share with us.
Well, that's it could be a very long story. My experience. I started my life like anyone else. Like big growing in a big city, middle class family that they both parents work, and I got lucky enough to have good studies in good schools and so on. But my life was really trending into the typical thing, and I actually got involved in all the typical things about studying and career, and I study actually business and marketing, and I was involved for that in that path for many years, really, with a really successful career for my age. But since I was very young, very early age, I remember now more than before, since I started doing my own spiritual path, I remember myself being very aware of the surroundings and the energies. I was very sensitive to things that were happening around me. But since no one really understood that type of experience that I was having since early ages, I like everyone else, you started learning things and trying to fit in society and family things. And so that's what I did. And so I started doing everything that I was supposed to do. And I started studying and then working in international companies, big corporations, doing my own career. And everything was seemingly perfect. Everything in the career, everything in my life was in place. I was having everything I was supposed to have. And actually, I got married at that time when I was 27, around that time. Um, well, I have to say that I'm from Chile, by the way. So my English is not, you know, the most
Excellent.
perfect one, but I know I can explain my ideas. And so I got married. I did everything that I was supposed to do at that time. But around the age of 30 and a little between 30 and 33, I started experiencing a very deep crisis in my life. It was such an unknown thing that was happening within myself that um, I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was a little crazy or a little or very depressed. And so I tried to find help through different paths, psychologists, and try to understand what was happening, talking to friends and family. But it seems like nothing was really letting me understand what I was going through. So after some time of trying to figure this out and try to, come back to my normal life at that time, um, I received this deep feeling that I needed to make a tremendous change in my life. I didn't know what was that or how I was supposed to do it. The only thing that happened within myself is that I was very sad, very depressed. I was not feeling connected with the life I had, although I had everything. I have a great house, a good career, cars, and whatever the idea of society at that time. And so I enter into this path of like, okay, I will let everything go. And that was very deep because at that time I was married, and I decided that I couldn't continue my marriage at that time, and I decided to sell everything I had. So I at that time I planned my life to change maybe after a year or so. So I started planning to sell my properties, my car, my things. I got divorced and so on, not knowing what I was doing really, but I knew I needed to go and walk around the world and try to figure out what is the purpose of my life and why I feel the way I feel. So by doing that, after a certain period of time, I got together with Napkiran, my current wife, that I knew her from before, from early years when I started working. But I haven't seen her since then, maybe around 10 years or more. And I started talking to her, and she already went through a similar process a couple of years before me. And so I had all this plan about traveling around the world, and I was really excited about finding someone that was resonating with my path, and actually was a little further in the process that I was. I was still in a very deep depression. I remember crying most of the time, not knowing anything, praying to God that I didn't know what was that I was praying to, but that was the only thing I could do at that time. And so the time went by, and I had this plan about traveling the world, and so when I needed to start my journey, I invited Napkiran to the journey. I said, Napkiran, why don't you join me and travel the world, and let's figure out more about everything that I don't know. So she said immediately yes, and so that was kind of the beginning of our journey together. And the first place where we went was India, because in a sense she was pushing me a little to go, but I knew I wanted to go to that country. And so we went there. We planned to be there for a couple of weeks. We ended staying for about 4 months, and we traveled around India in different places, different areas of it, trying to find a little more of the ancient wisdom. At the beginning was a little difficult because we didn't know much about India, and really the ancient wisdom is not in the tourist areas, and to get involved with all of that, really you need to dive deep and ask a lot of questions and follow your intuition and so on. So at that moment, Napkira, my wife, was already a Kundalini teacher. So before traveling to India, I had practiced quite frequently with her for the first time. And every time I entered those classes that she was teaching, I always experienced something very profound in myself, especially peace, because my life and my mind was very crazy at that time. So that was really intriguing for me. And so when we were traveling in India, one of the things we wanted to encounter was, more about the ancient wisdom of Kundalini Yoga. And we started asking around, asking people, yogis, and no one seems to know. Even if you ask Kundalini Yoga, like people, even the yogis there, didn't really, most of them, at least the ones we started talking at the beginning, knew about it, or they didn't want to talk about it. That's another thing. So in that search, we traveled to different places. We went for a while into the south of India to the ashram of Amma, the Hugging Mother, a very beautiful woman. I don't know if you know her.
Wonderful.
And we stayed there with her for a few weeks, understanding everything that she was doing. And it was a very profound experience, but no Kundalini anywhere. And so finally, when we were, I think was in Rishikesh, we found an ashram that says that they were teaching Kundalini Yoga. And so we went there for like a week to have like a sort of immersion in Kundalini Yoga. But since the first day, we realized that the Kundalini Yoga they were teaching was taught by a person from the US, but it was not really the ancient sort of thing that we wanted to find. So it was a great experience, and Rishikesh is a wonderful place to visit, and so we had a lot of great experience and fun there. But at the end, we went to Varanasi. We thought, Varanasi is the most ancient city everywhere that in the world, still going on more than 5,000 years. And we said, okay, if there's knowledge of Kundalini Yoga, someone might know around there. We went there, we couldn't find anything, and we started talking with the sadhus. These guys are painted, and these yogis that sits there and basically don't do much. We tried to talk to them, and I remember that one of the sadhus there, when I saw directly into his eyes, I asked him, "Do you know anything about Kundalini Yoga?" And he like kind of moved a little bit and moved to the side, and I thought, okay, he's asking me to sit next to him. So that's what I did. I just sit next to him, and I started to meditate or close my eyes. So I started feeling the energy of this guy. I was already kind of sensitive to energy. In India, I also did my Reiki master. I did all the levels and so on at that time. So I knew about energy, and it was a very intriguing experience because I kind of felt it that I was drawn into like a sort of vortex or something that was happening within me when I was sitting next to him. And at that time, I didn't realize. I realized this a long time after. I recall the memories. I did have a sort of download of information, but while I was sitting next to him, and I didn't put much attention at that time. But coming to more to the present, after all that journey in India, then we traveled to Indonesia and Thailand and other places. Always trying to look for different spiritual things. It was not only about Kundalini Yoga. But when we came back to Chile, the country where I was born, we went to live in a very small town, and we decided that we didn't want to have like a luxury life, or at least a stressful life. And so what I did mostly was to meditate and do Kundalini Yoga with my wife. And at that time, when I started meditating, I was very regular in my meditation. I meditate maybe 2-3 times a day for at least 30 minutes, 60 minutes. I dedicate a lot to meditation. I started recalling memories, like I started having insights and downloads of things, different sort of things, information that it didn't make much sense at the beginning. It was about how the body works, the energy works, and intuitively. So I started playing with that. I started realizing that I had the capacity to play with the energy more than I was taught in Reiki and other things. And that was really beautiful. I started opening to do healing, and the healing sessions were very powerful. And so after a few years from that point, I decided to study Kundalini Yoga. I remember I received that in a meditation, like you should study Kundalini Yoga. And I recall that in that meditation, I was supposed to ask a friend that wasn't a Kundalini teacher at all, but a very close friend. So I asked her, I had this call about studying Kundalini Yoga, and in that message, I received that I should ask you about this. I know you don't study, or you haven't studied, you don't practice Kundalini Yoga. And she's like, very interesting. Last week, I just got a work business to help with the online marketing of one of the biggest schools of yoga in South America, that is a Chilean one. And I'm like, okay. And she said, well, the owner is a Kundalini Yoga teacher, and one of the main things that they teach is Kundalini. They teach Ashtanga, Iyengar, and Hatha, and so on, but also Kundalini. So I was okay. That's the way to go. So I went and met this guy that is called Jaidev, and immediately I had like a very profound, very beautiful connection with him. By the time that I started meeting him and talking to him, I realized that he might have not been the teacher or the yogi that I was looking in India, but he had spent at that time about 20 years of traveling to India to find the roots of Kundalini Yoga. And every year he went for a few months just to go around everywhere, and try to find the roots. So he started telling me all the stories and the search, and how many experiences he had with, hidden yogis in the Himalayas that teach Kundalini Yoga, or the ancient type of Kundalini Yoga. There's a lot of more details into this, but one of the things that I immediately started feeling with Kundalini Yoga was the capacity to take me out of that depression, take me out of anxiety, take me out of any sort of emotion that was stuck there that didn't let me feel free or feel in peace. And that was one of the main reasons why I wanted to study it, because although I knew how to work with energy, and I still do, and actually I think the capacity of me as a healer have increased dramatically because of the Kundalini practices. Um, there was something very unique in the energy I was feeling connected with the Kundalini. In a sense, I studied the typical Kundalini yoga that everyone can access in the Western hemisphere, but there is something that grow within myself that it's more of an ancient style of Kundalini yoga or ancient science that somehow was embedded in my system, or I received it as a
That's
memory.
exactly what I felt when I went to your classes. There was a very different energy compared to other classes I've been to. And that intrigued me a lot. There's something, yes, you're drawing on that ancient wisdom.
Yeah, and I think that's a thing that I didn't know at the beginning. This is a reflection like you do to me, that it had happened many, 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 many times with different people. So, but um, and so when people started coming to our classes, a lot of them said, oh wow, I experienced something that I never experienced before, even if I have done Kundalini yoga for a long time or maybe a few classes.
So
and
true.
and and
Absolutely.
you know what is involved in that, at least from my perspective, is that I didn't um compartmentalize. I don't know the word. I didn't get into the box of Kundalini yoga, at least in the style of the Western. I there's a thing that arises within myself that is, a kind of like a pure energy. And that's the idea of Kundalini yoga.
Mhm.
That the idea or the aim of Kundalini is that you awaken a certain energy within you that is called the Kundalini. There is a spiritual energy that in the modern times is the Christ consciousness, you can say. It's the same. It's one and the same. It's just that at that time Christ was not on earth. So, other names, other things. But and so what happens in my path was that I awaken the energy, the Chakti, letting it be free in the process. So I did it in my own way. In Kundalini Yoga, taught, in the West, there's certain structure of things. You need to do 40 days of this or 1,000 days of this practice, this kriya. And there's a lot of, ideas and concepts of how to awaken the spiritual energy. And I think, and this is my overall, approach to it, is that it has been too much of mindset, a mind kind of path. So
Mhm.
a lot of masculine energy in it,
Yes.
and not so much of the feminine energy. And this is a contradiction because Kundalini in itself is a tantric practice. And tantra means the interwoven of the feminine and masculine to neutralize the inner polarities, so you can awaken this path that gives you the enlightenment. And
Mhm.
so there's always this very subtle movement between, in Kundalini Yoga, between doing the practices, the sentences are very intense and very, strong, but at the same time having this inner space where you feel open, loving, gentle with yourself. So
Mhm.
there's a very, very precise, point there where we have to find that inner balance. And so in a way, what happened to me, that's what I can explain, is that I let this process happen in a more free way than usually the way it's taught. And I think that is one of the aspects. The other one is that I have intrinsically a lot of bhakti energy, devotional energy. And I think that's also something very important in the spiritual path. No matter if you study Kundalini or any yoga, all yogas go to the same place. It doesn't matter what type of yoga you study. At the end, the ultimate goal is to unify. And so devotion is a very important aspect of this. And if you want to work with the Shakti, that is this, active energy, the way to channel that energy is bhakti too. There's needs to be a little bit of devotion into the process and surrendering into the process. So it's not all about like pushing and pressing and moving the energy like, a lot of people do nowadays with Kundalini. There's these powerful Kundalini people that move the energy through the body, and people start shaking and doing things like that. In my perspective, it's not a healthy practice. Although it can work and help in certain degree, it doesn't take you to the last, the 10th gate, the connection with the divine.
I think that was a little bit, I would say, my reticence to seeing classes that were, for me, I think were not being held correctly, and it was not a safe spot for the students because too many things were happening that the students didn't understand, and I don't felt the teacher was in control. And, just having students come and students go, there is no follow through. And it's such a very personal and strong, powerful effect that it's really important to be under the guidance of someone that you can trust and feel safe with. I think it's a very important aspect. And I do see that in a lot of Western classes where that part of bhakti, that part of love and compassion is almost a little bit left out for that quick fix. Like the Westerners always want that quick reset button, get me there fast. I want to be enlightened like now, instead of letting that process and guiding that process to happen. And I think that's a little bit where maybe people have had some bad experiences in Kundalini. And I'd really like to be able to set that out there, that is not Kundalini done correctly. It's Kundalini should be under a guided, safe place with a teacher that you know and trust.
I totally agree with you, and I have experienced that, and I have seen that too. I understand the ancient way of the yogis and the gurus in India that says, you need to practice these sort of powerful practices through someone that really can feel and understand and touch this energy in such a way that can be managed, and I can understand that now when I'm teaching. And this is something that you probably also feel, when you're connected in the flow of the class, teaching a class. If you're really present, and that's very important, not being in the mind, it's in the flow of the energy that goes through the class. You can sense the group, you can sense each individual process at the same time. So we as teachers, we need to have certain level of mastery of how to deal with the movements of the energy of the group and individually as well, and guide them. No, I sometimes change the, if anyone had studied Kundalini Yoga, you will know that you have to follow the very, very precise timings and things in the class. You can't change anything. That's the rule. And if the ones that teach this hear me now, I will get in some problem for sure. But I have discovered, at least because of my wisdom or my inner experience, that sometimes you need to kind of adapt the process and the kriya through the group or the person. And that makes a lot of sense. But I understand why the typical class of Kundalini Yoga needs to have a certain process. And this is because most people are not taught or are not prepared to awaken their consciousness in such a way that they can manage and deal with these energies intuitively. And if you try to go out of the very precise kriya and timings and things without having that connection, that could be a little more dangerous actually than even just following the rules. Anyway, that's more or less what I can share about my story with Kundalini Yoga. And so for me, have been a life-changing experience, and I have seen so many beautiful things happening around this. People that came with depression and they feel purpose in life again. People that, they were using chemical drugs to balance the endocrine system, thyroid and things like that, that after a certain period of time, they start decreasing it until they stop having those pills. And things like that can happen with any practice of yoga if you're devoted to it. But this is what I have seen quite often in my practices. So I I do believe strongly that, by learning about yourself, learning about the ways the energy move, and this is the science of Kundalini Yoga, it's the tantric science of how the energy move and how to move it in certain ways. So you regain not only a certain degree of mastery of your body and mind, but that also give you the capacity to self-heal. No, I'm sure everyone have heard this idea that the body knows everything how to heal, and the only reason why it doesn't is because you have ideas in your mind, beliefs and things that
On
are
the right vibration,
yeah,
like in the density.
exactly. So when we take out our mind of of all those biases and all those conflict and those vibrations and electromagnetism that are low and doesn't work properly in our body, then the body will naturally heal. And it's totally possible. I've seen it so many times.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Something you mentioned about before that I thought maybe we could just touch that subject a little is for some people who've been to some Kundalini classes and decided they didn't like it, or their difficulties, like with the arms being up for a long time and these things. Could you say to help people have a little bit more patience with that and the reason why, maybe?
Well, waheguru, I would say. That's an expression that we use a lot to say, this is in the hands of God. And there's a process there. Yes, definitely in Kundalini Yoga, we can do a lot of things with hands and arms. And that usually for most people, especially women, can be a little more challenging.
Yes.
But not only that, I remember when I was studying, and I have seen this in class as well, there's a lot of men that can come that are very fit, even very, sports. They do a lot of sports and so on. And I've seen this and I always kind of laugh. I shouldn't, but internally I do so. It's just funny to see, this very big guy with a lot of muscles open the arms and say, okay, I will do this. And start doing the breath and so on. Next to him, there's a very old lady that regularly practice, Kundalini Yoga, but I'm talking like a skinny old lady. And so he started doing the thing, and suddenly he started feeling that he can't hold it anymore. And so he looks next to him, and the old lady is still like, no problem. And he's like, oh my God, start taking all of that. The thing is, there's a degree of things that happens, What I always say at the beginning in most of the classes, I say, what you're going to experience is all about the limits of your mind. It's never about the body per se, unless you have, certain disease or certain pain or certain things accidents that you had in your body. It's always about the mind. The body has a wisdom, and every time we do a practice in Kundalini Yoga, we have to try to get to the limits of our mind and body. And if it's possible, go a little beyond that. There's a great deal of energy that's going to be released and change if you do so. But if you can't hold it for a long time, you just don't do it. Your body and the practice, the kriya in itself, will give you what you are capable of receiving. So the benefits of the practice will come to you even if you just did it for 30 seconds and you were supposed to do it for 30, because that's what your level is right now. But the important thing is that when you're having the struggles, you have to realize that the first thing that is happening, it's in your mind. It's your mind. Your mind is telling you, oh, I'm tired. I can't do it. This is impossible. Why I listened to my friend to come to this class. This is not yoga, all of those kind of thoughts are in the mind very fast happening. And those thoughts are the ones that are making your body weak, really. So if you have the capacity to observe the way your mind is behaving and keep the practice going, because usually it's with some certain pranayama, and you focus into the pranayama and you say, okay, I will listen to Satya, I will stay a little longer, more than my mind is telling me, there's always a breakthrough. Always there's a breakthrough. It can be just for maybe a second, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, where you stay more than you usually have done before. And there's a rush of energy. There's a change in the mind that actually most people, after that, limit that they encounter in themselves, they feel stronger, and they can say, after that, they say, oh, I can stay here for a very long time. So the beauty about going through these processes is that you are dealing with the same things that are outside of the class happening for you unconsciously. So, we all want the life to change in certain ways. Some people want love, some people want prosperity or having this and that. And the reason why we're not happy, it's because we have certain um, thoughts, certain limited belief about reality and about who we are. We have definitions. So when you are doing certain practices, and this is the tantric way of Kundalini Yoga, and you can stay there. You can go beyond that experience, just even if it's a second. You're liberating those limited belief or those energies that are playing around in your life day to day. So when you just go through it for maybe a few seconds and you feel that rush or that change, then you maybe are not aware, but when you go out of the class, your life starts changing immediately because you did something very profound while you were in the class. And that's why in Kundalini Yoga, people can see the people that usually practice like in a different sort of energy, with more radiance. We say in Kundalini Yoga, there's a shining energy that expands around us. That definitely everyone can explore. It's one of the 10 bodies that we talk in Kundalini Yoga. And that is something that happened naturally. We refine our energy and we balance the polarity within. And so we get into a more neutral state of being. And that opens compassion, that's open wisdom. Everyone can be compassionate, everyone can have wisdom. But for that to happen, we have to have inner peace. And that peace comes when we learn how to master our energy so the polarity that builds through electromagnetism, all the life and everything in the Maya can neutralize inside of you enough so you can experience who you are. That is your natural self. Well, we call it Satnam usually as a way of expressing it in Kundalini Yoga.
Okay, wonderful. That's really, really very interesting, all this. And I'd love to hear more. Satya, I think you wanted to share a little practice with our listeners today.
Definitely.
Okay.
I will share a practice that will take a few minutes. And as you said at the beginning, specifically in this practice, is written down in the scripts that you shouldn't drive after doing this practice. Okay, so I will say that again. If you park in the sideway just to listen to this podcast, don't do this practice if you need to drive. I'm sure you could drive, but it's better not to.
You can do it later on when they get home. They can go through and watch it again.
Definitely. Well, I choose this practice because it's fairly easy to remember the practice. And what it does is that it helps us to balance the metabolism of the body and also integrate the two hemispheres. So what it brings is an inner sense of peace. So, if we're in life struggling and, stressful and so on, this is one of the many practices that you can do to build up a peaceful inner experience. And so, the first thing we do, it's a mudra. That might be difficult at the beginning to do it, but it's very simple, And the beauty about the mudras is that they work, in the nervous system and in the brain in many different ways. It's very interesting to learn about this more. So the mudra, it would be the following. We're going to separate these two fingers, and then the thumb, we're going to open it out. It's a little difficult to coordinate the brain. I know. It happens to me, but this is the idea, okay? You build up the mudra in this way. So the importance here is that the arms are stretched back parallel to the spine. So it opened the chest and the shoulder blades at the back tend to get together. Okay, this will help to have a stable core and also open the pathway of the energy to flow up. So the idea will be to have this mudra with the thumb pointing in next to your neck, and head. So this will be the mudra we're going to use, okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to breathe in a certain pattern. The way to do it is that we're going to inhale in 10 distinctive strokes. So that means that we inhale a little bit and we cut the inhalation. Then we inhale and cut, and we do this 10 times. The tricky thing about the stroke breathing is that we have to try to find the volume of air that make all of the stroke equal in the amount of air you intake. But also at the same time, we need to fully use our capacity of the lungs. So we need to find not only the how much to equalize in each one, but also the total volume of the inhalation has to happen in our lungs. So that is something to practice, okay? And so we're gonna inhale in 10 strokes through nose. And let me change here so maybe you can hear better my breath. So the idea is to breathe in 10 strokes kind of fast. It's around 2 per second. So it's kind of like this. And then you're gonna hold it for about the same time, about 6-7 seconds. And then you're gonna exhale in 10 strokes. Empty the lungs and hold it for the same amount of time, about 6 to 7 seconds. And then we inhale again in 10 strokes. So the idea is that these practices should be done with a specific mantra. Yeah, I'm gonna play it for just a couple of minutes, and then the mantra I will change a little bit. It will stop the mantra per se, and I will start playing the gong. Yeah, just to give a little bit of energy and push into the practice. And so just try to listen the mantra. The mantra, it's a very famous mantra from the Sikh religion that we use, that is At Sach, Yugat Sach, Heavy Sach, Nanak Tehosi, Be Sach. The meaning of that mantra is very important in the tradition of the Sikhism and for us in Kundalini Yoga, because it talks about all the possible states of truth. What it means the following. It says truth in the beginning, truth throughout the ages, truth at this moment, and Nanak says this is true, this truth shall ever be. So it's about remembering that the truth is always eternal, past, present, future. And that is the meaning of this mantra. And so I will invite you now to get into a straight position. Lift your chest a little bit and place your hands in position in the mudra next to your body. Feel the opening of your heart. Lifting your chest a little bit and bringing your chin in Yarandaravan. And we're going to have the eyes just a little bit open, 1/10, looking in the tip of the nose, and try to focus your attention in the tip of the nose. And when I tell you, you can start. Just exhale the air. And let's begin inhaling in 10 strokes. And then hold the breath in for about 7 seconds. And start exhaling in 10 strokes. And hold the breath out for 6 to 7 seconds. And then inhale again in 10 strokes and keep it going. Keep your focus in the tip of the nose. And do a complete breath, a yogic breath.
Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach Adi Sach Shugadi Sach Eve Sach Namo Sive Sach.
Keep going. Stay in the position and take a deep breath in and hold it. Close your eyes and roll them up to your crown, like trying to see through that 10th gate, your pineal gland, and apply a soft movement. And through nose, very slowly, start letting go the air, empty your lungs, and stay there for just a moment until I tell you to inhale. Take a long and deep inhalation through nose. Keep rolling your eyes up and apply Mulevan Root Lock. And try to find that inner space of peace and light within you. And slowly, very slowly, and controlling that exhalation, exhale through nose and slowly bring your hands down. And just feel your body, your presence, your energy. Become familiar with the state you can feel and whatever it is. Just embrace that with pure love, being grateful for everything that you are, for everything that you experience. Understanding that the gift of life is the only thing that really matters. And that coming into this present moment, you can understand the importance of that gift. Where you can find peace, wisdom, compassion. And very slowly start coming back to your body, opening your eyes.
Well, that was amazing. Just every time when I practice with you, when I've been into your classes a couple of times or followed different things, it's just in such a short time, I'm just amazed at the power of the energy, how it moves and what I'm feeling. It's just incredible. And I meditate a lot every day, all the time, and have many different experiences. But I just find this so incredibly powerful, and like you feel it right away in even such a short time. That's pretty amazing. Thank you, Satya.
Thank you, Terry. I'm glad you had a nice experience. I hope the gong could be listened more or less well, through the microphone and Zoom and all of that. But yeah, thank you.
And I hope everyone else out there has experienced or feeling. And if you're not, don't worry about that. It's with practice and with time. I am a yoga teacher, and I practice and meditate all along. So I'm very sensitive to the energies, and I feel them very strongly. And if you're new to the practice, you might not feel them so strongly at the beginning. Correct me if I'm wrong, Satya. But with your practice and your time, you will really feel a lot of these energies being released, changing, shifting within you. And it's such a beautiful practice.
I totally agree with you. Especially a practice like this is not necessarily a practice that beginners will immediately realize the change that happens. But, these practices done in this way, they change the inner chemistry of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that most people at the beginning, when you're starting your journey to healing and being more in touch with yourself, we're very disconnected, usually the mind from the body. So that's the normal case for most people, especially at the beginning. So sometimes we can't really realize the changes in the system, but they happen. They happen. And that's the beauty about yoga, in general. This ancient wisdom, it have been proved through thousands of years. And now science just prove that this work. And
Yes.
so it's just about, giving yourself time,
Mhm.
compassion, practice, dedication, and everything will move into a more positive, expanded life.
So, for everyone listening, from August 10th to, what are our dates? Sorry, I got the dates wrong. In August, anyways, we are having the Kundalini immersion for a 10-day program with Satya, Nafkaran, myself, and Johanna as your teachers. Satya and Nafkaran will be the Kundalini teachers, and Johanna and I will be giving other classes of meditation and pranayama with the horses. But Satya, can you first explain to us a little bit about what you're teaching, or what other students can expect to look for or enjoy and from this experience if they decide to join us?
Yeah, I think it would be a great experience for many reasons. First of all, I've done this sort of program before, and the experience have been really amazing. And it doesn't really matter if you are totally a beginner or you're experienced yogi in maybe in other traditions, even in Kundalini Yoga. I've done this course for hundreds of people before, and from every avenue they come and have a wonderful experience. The idea of this Kundalini immersion would be to, first of all, give you a sort of rational explanation of what is Kundalini and how it moves and how it works, to have a basis in your mind, in your intellect, about how the energies are going to start moving. So I will give a sort of an explanation of what is Kundalini from the ancient scripts and the ancient knowledge, and we're going to take that into a process that will take a few days to work with. We're going to move that process of the Kundalini knowledge into the Pranic Body. In Kundalini Yoga, well, in yoga in general, but in Kundalini Yoga, we also talk about the Pranic Body. And it's a very important one, especially in this year. We in the tantric numerology system, if you sum the numbers of the year, you're going to go to the number 8. And in the science of Kundalini Yoga and tantric numerology, the 8 is a pranic body. And so in a sense, one of the most important things that you can learn this year to achieve a healthy life and be in the best possible place is to master your pranic body. And one of the most relevant practices for that is pranayama, but also, the movement of the body and how you use the asana, how you use the mudras, how you use the mantras. All of those practices in yoga will bring you into a certain state to master this pranic body. And so what we're going to be diving deeper into is how the pranic body works in very different ways to move this spiritual energy that we call it Kundalini in the ancient scripts. Because it's one of the first steps that we need to learn about ourselves is to relate with ourselves from the perspective of energy. The pranic body is all about energy. It's the life force that creates and sustains everything out in creation. So if we start understanding the notions of how this pranic body and energy moves in our body, then we can do something with it. If you don't know yourself from the perspective of energy, then you are gonna just use your physical body, and that's one of the 10 bodies that we talk in Kundalini Yoga. And so the idea will be to start learning about more in depth about the pranic body and how it moves into your system in what is called the vayus, the winds. And so there's, in the Sanskrit and the yogi tradition, there's names for 10 of those vayus, and mostly are known 5 of them. And we're going to do specific kriyas, specific pranayams, mantras. We're going to use all the technology available of Kundalini Yoga and some other practices that I have learned through the years that will give us the possibility to connect with that force specifically. And so, for example, there's typical things that I always talk about that, you have the prana that comes into your body and builds up, part of who you are. And so the flow of this energy in different parts of your body have different names and have different attributes as well. So, for example, most people in Western society, because of they are sitting all the time and the way they think and the programs they have in their minds. One of the things that is not working properly is the aspect of the apana. That is one of the values of prana. And so when the apana is not working properly, you can really release things. Physically, you are constrained, you can go well to the bathroom, for example, but also works a lot in the mind. If you don't have the apana working properly and flowing in accordance with the other ones, then you tend to have a mindset that can't change. You can't let go of old beliefs, ideas, even the wounds or the emotional baggage you have, you don't let it go because of not having a balanced apana. And so there's different things about this sort of understanding that if you know about it and you do the specific asana, kriya, breathwork, pranayam, you move that energy and suddenly something shifts in your entire body. And so learning about this is, a first step, but very deep step to change your life and get a better life. So we're going to go into these different days working in these different values, the 5 main ones, and learning and practicing techniques that you can take back home. And this is, I think, one of the good things about having this immersion is that you can apply this not only in this immersion that for sure will shift things and you will experience enormous change, but you can take this wisdom with you and apply it through your life whenever you need it. If you need to, for example, learn new things, you need to work on more on the samana area. And so if you want to study something and you feel that you can't get it in your mind, then there's certain places in the body that can work in the level of the mind. And so you enhance your capacity of learning. So there's so many different things that we can dive into. But also we're going to not only go in deep into the pranic body and how that works into awakening the spiritual energy of Kundalini, but we're also going to add up a little bit of white tantra practices that is part of the concept of Kundalini Yoga. We didn't touch that in this interview, but the white tantra is an aspect of very ancient way of connecting with the tantra knowledge that brings out a very angelic, very elevated frequency, very refined frequency. And so when we start engaging with this white tantric knowledge and doing certain practices, there's a energy that builds in the group and within yourself that really expand, and there's a huge radiance coming out of yourself. And we're also going to experience a little bit of that. So that could be a sort of a very brief explanation, but I'm very open to, if there's more questions, you can also send us the questions, or we can get another podcast and, with the question, go deeper into what it is.
Yes, that would be, maybe a second podcast would be great. So you've listened to Satya and everything that during your Kundalini practice, what you'll be learning and practicing, and really taking home tools with you as well. And then for my part and Johanna, we will be giving you classes to go along with working with the pranic energy and the prana, our field, our energetic field, and how that vibration will also connect with horses. And being in the presence of horses, how it deepens the process of healing. They naturally, through their heart energy, their magnetic field of the heart, it changes the vibration and energy of our heart to more calm and peaceful. It increases dopamine within us. There's just incredible things that happen when we're in the presence of horses. So we'll be leading classes in meditation, mantra chanting, and pranayama with the horses for you to experience that. And for those that are yoga teachers, certified yoga teachers through us or through anybody else, it doesn't matter. It will also count as CEs, which are continued education hours, because yoga teachers, we all need to every year to apply new credited hours to our registration with Yoga Alliance. So it also, through this, you'll be able to gain those points as well. And I wanted to also let everyone know that has watched this podcast that we want to offer a 10% discount to our upcoming retreat. And also in the caption, we will put our website where you can go to for more information on the Kundalini immersion. There's a whole section on that. You can also contact us and let us know that you've watched the podcast, and we can apply the discount for you. And if you have questions, please contact us too. I'm happy to answer questions. And so is Satya. He can also answer them if it's something really relative to Kundalini you would like to know more about. Anything. We are just open to all your questions. It is in August. It's limited space. We only have 12 spots for it, and we've already have certain spots booked. So if you're interested, we'll keep the discount open up until the beginning of July. Also in the bio and the caption, Satya is offering a free class link, so you can click on that link and it'll take you to a whole free class. And also, if you're interested from that, you can also go, they have an online program for Kundalini online classes. You can also look into that if you want to start practicing Kundalini before coming to join us, or just to continue at any rate. What else can I add here?
Well, I would just recommend to experience this. I'm sure it will be something very unique for everyone. You know, coming to Costa Rica in itself is something very unique. Coming to the Caribe of Costa Rica, it's something very unique and different from the rest of Costa Rica. Coming to your farm with the horses, you know, the surroundings, it's just something very unique. Experiencing Kundalini Yoga with me and my wife in all of this is something very unique. So if you want to have like those moments, those days that you can give yourself a very beautiful experience, and probably something that will be marking your life, giving you a possibility of changing, you know, certain things and learning new things. I think it's just a very beautiful moment to dive deep into a new experience. And I will be happy to be there for you all. Just take the decision, feel it, and jump in.
And also I'd add, like, because you talked about the energy of the place. And really, yes, the energy of Costa Rica, there's several places in the world, as we know, with specific energy. And there is a specific energy. I won't go into depth about that now. But in the Caribbean, even more so, we have very strong energy columns in different parts of this area that really, if there's a place to heal, if there's a place to create that awareness and that consciousness to a higher consciousness, there's not an easier place to access that energy than where we are right now. So, and then horses will have the support of the horses as well. So yes, we really do hope you come and join us and experience this with us together in this beautiful country, in this beautiful land that we have around us. And so for that, I wish you all a beautiful day and much love and light to all. Sat Nam.
Satnam.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry.